Hello, everybody. I hope everybody had a good 3-day break. Found a little time to relax, or if you're one of the people that has to work over Labor Day weekend, that you made decent money during that time, because usually the 3-day week, if you're one of the ones that has to work on the 3-day weekends, especially for people that make tips and stuff, there's usually a little extra money. So hopefully it was a good weekend for everybody. So this week, we're going to be moving on to data, which that goes much better than hardware in a virtual class, because talking about how we store the information and a few things to go over. Let me write these names on the list before I forget. Just click the button for it. There we go. So yeah, looking at data this week. There's a couple quick points I want to make about PowerPoint or slide decks. I guess I should say PowerPoint or Keynote or Google Slides, or whichever one you use. There's lots of different ones, but the one we use to put our slide decks together. I have 2 short points to make about those. Finishing up last week's assignment. Then we'll probably go ahead and look at Excel before our break today, and then after the break, I wanted to talk about binary representation. It's not something you'll be tested on in this class, or that officially is in the major course learning objectives, is an SDEV 120. But in the current statewide shell, the one for IB Online, and most people on campuses, on most of the campuses, just use that IB Online shell and just modify it a little bit. So this standard statewide course shell for IB Tech, binary code got pushed over into a discussion board instead of assignments and quizzes and things. There used to be a much bigger deal made about it. And a few of us, while we were talking, were like, that's binary seems like kind of an important thing to be delegated to a discussion board, because there's a lot of students that never do the discussion boards. They're usually not worth a lot of points, and people just, that's usually the first thing people skip. So I'm going to go ahead and include binary in this class as well. So for us, it's really sort of a preview mode, or if you've had the SDEV 120 class, a review mode, a review on it. You won't be tested on it in this class, but I guess the thought is to start working it into other classes instead of having one class specifically where we would spend a week or 2 on it, because in that class, we don't spend a week or 2 on just that one topic anymore. So starting to work that into other places as well. And that's a big part of data, because that's what our machines are storing. So we want to kind of go over how binary works, sort of in preview mode, a quick pass at it, the key points, definitely not super detailed, and hopefully help get a good foundation on whichever pathway you're heading down. So first off, and then on Thursday, we'll talk more about the level of data we use. Because binaries, that's the data as the machine knows it, but what the machine does isn't the most useful form for us. So on Thursday, we'll look at some databases. Your lab this week is a small database. Walk through Microsoft Access, which is available on the school's computers, not just the GRE lab. So any school computer that you can get to through Beyond Trust, whether it's Ellersburg, or if you're an Indianapolis student or a Fort Wayne student, or any of the ones you have on your list for Beyond Trust, any of those computers will have Microsoft Access on it. So if you don't have it on your local machine, just do the remote access and do the whole lab there. I think the pictures I put in the lab manual were done with remote access to show that you don't necessarily need to install it. That's a small database. We'll look at it some on Thursday in class as well. They usually say it's good for like small companies with up to a couple hundred customers, or for individual teachers where they might have just a couple hundred students, but not necessarily a whole school with thousands of students. I have seen a few people over the years get access to work with thousands of clients, but they weren't doing extensive data collection with them. They were kind of, they had small data sets they were collecting from. But we'll look at databases on Thursday. And I also wanted to look at some non-relational databases. Two important terms this week, as we talk about data, are going to be structured data and unstructured data. They'll apply a lot more on Thursday when we're talking about databases. But you can think of it as a table. We're getting ready to look at Excel here in a few minutes, and everything's organized nicely into rows and columns, and we keep everything straight that way. And what we call structured data, the short version of that is, think of that table being filled up. Like we sort of filling out a form. Everybody we collect data from, we have the same data from every person, right? They put their name on there, their age, their address, and they all fill out the same form, so we have that same data. First, data is more of just random collections, and we have a lot of those. Like the stuff we would grab from social media, right? Instead of having every single person's name, age, address, and all of that stuff detailed, we might know different things about every single person. Like we know one person drives a Mustang. We know somebody else swears they're never going to eat at Applebee's again. And, we know one person's birthday, and know somebody else is heading on vacation next week. Right? It's all different data points for everybody that we know we have in our database. So if we tried to put that in a nice organized table, it would be an awful looking table because there would be more empty cells than filled cells. So that's unstructured data, and we need ways to work with that. So we'll take a brief look at that along with structured data and relational databases on Thursday. But your lab this week is an introduction to structured databases. Before we get into that, just a couple, I guess, looking at the foundational assignment things. I didn't really talk much about slide decks last week. Most people are familiar with those, and as long as you know how to put the stuff together, that was fine. And I really only have 2 comments for making slide decks. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and point at a couple things. Get this out of the way. And I'm a Google Docs user. I believe I've mentioned that before in here. I always use Google. I use Google Office a lot more than any local software. Well, it works on all the different systems. I'm on the Mac today. Y'all have noticed I have multiple systems. I usually carry 3 laptops with me, and those laptops also have virtual machines on them. So I have a lot of different systems I carry, and Google Docs is definitely the most accommodative for that. Plus, I'm a phone person. I like to do things on the phone as much as I can. And for putting together a slide deck where we're just positioning pictures and writing short phrases, that is really, really easy to do on the phone. So I'll just use that for the examples here, but they all have the same, sort of the same functionality. Let's create a new one. So right off the bat, if you just create a new one, it's going to look like a new Word document, right? It's white with black letters, and that's really, really boring. Because what we're trying to do when we put together a slide deck is we're trying to convince somebody of something. We need to use this to motivate them to agree to the idea we're trying to spread, or to disapprove of something if that's our goal. But we're trying to convince people of something, or persuade them. And black letters on white text are definitely not the best way to do that. We're going to talk about that. I have that in my notes somewhere for later this semester. I think week 5 or 6, we'll talk about that, and some of the things like with color theory and how certain colors work better to help convince people. We'll slide that in later because we're going to talk for a few minutes about it. But one you've probably heard is that red and yellow tend to make people hungry. That's why all the fast food signs, why so many fast food signs have red and yellow in them, because that's a better color to make people hungry and convince them that they want to buy food. So things like that go great in slide decks. So you probably don't want that. So you would look through the available themes and choose those. Choose one of the themes that looks good. I'll just click on a random one here. But you will almost always want to customize that. I guess resumes might be a good example. I always use resumes as an example. Like some people, if you open up Microsoft Word and you need to put together a resume and you go straight to the resume template and just follow that template, some employers are going to look at that and be like, "Oh, that's great. They use the very first Microsoft Word template on the list. They know how to follow policies and things like that, and they'll be happy to see that template." Whereas other employers, potential employers, are going to look at that and be like, "Ooh, a template, throw it right in the trash." Right? It's different ones. So knowing your audience makes a difference, but you're probably going to want to customize the stuff a little bit too. And to customize them, you don't want to go through slide by slide and do it. Right? That can add up. You might end up with a really long presentation and have a lot of slides to do that on. So in all of them, there's sort of a main slide to work with. On PowerPoint and Keynote, it was before people realized certain words were offensive. Certain words before people realized that certain words were just straight out offensive to a lot of people. So on PowerPoint and Keynote, it's called the master slide. But in some of the newer software, they use the more modern names, getting away from that old terminology that electrical engineers started applying back in the 1920s and 30s, and only later realized that it was offensive to a lot of people. So on PowerPoint and Keynote, you'll want to look for what's called the master slide or slide master. I can't remember which way they put the words, but on a lot of the newer ones, it'll be listed under theme. So like edit the theme or changing the theme is just taking from a list. So editing the theme, and here you get all the general layout of all of your slides. So you can come in here and really customize this stuff nicely. So like maybe doing something for Ivy Tech, that's kind of green, but blue is definitely not the Ivy Tech color. We might want to change that to something green that fits the school colors. We customize that a little bit better. I gotta get the Zoom thumbnails out of my way. There we go. Oh, that's not really out of my way, but I'll move them again in a moment. And what other options do we have? I think there's some options for formatting. Oh, if I right click on it. Exposure. I thought there was a format button here that would, maybe I have to do that somewhere else. Oh, the Zoom pictures are in my way again. Oh, there it is, format options. And now I can click back on that picture I was actually looking for. Change the size and position of all that stuff, kind of go through the menus, choose that one, maybe add add a little shadow to it. It's a black background, so maybe a white shadow or a light colored shadow. Something like that. Make it a little blurrier. And I don't know, maybe reflect it. Yeah, that'll work. There's different options. Just kind of a quick pass at it here. Do things to make it look, adjust the appearance. So maybe you start with the theme, so you're not working with black letters on a white background, but go through here and adjust these slides to kind of fit what you're doing a little bit better, so that you're not straight on the template. That's almost always a good idea. I'll just do it on like 3 of them. So maybe on this one, change that to our school, something more like our school colors here. There is an official one listed somewhere in the paperwork, but if you've looked around at different Ivy Tech logos and posters and things, you probably noticed that there's a lot of different shades of green being used. The official one is is what's on the sign out in front of campus. That's the official one, but there's a lot of wiggle room because so many people have used slightly different shades of green. Or maybe you don't like these bulleted lists. Like, I don't want just the dots, so why is my thing not clicking there? Oh, I have to do that up here. That's on this one. The bullets were just showing there. To choose one of those, and you can change the type of bullets and things like that. Maybe with the little arrows and diamonds, yeah. Make that look better and sort of adjust it. I think this would have the overall font. I'll just click a random font. Okay, yeah, that has the overall font. And make it look a little, give it a little customization, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. Anytime you're putting together a slide deck, really what you're doing is you're trying to convince somebody of something. And colors and pictures and nice fonts go a long ways for that. Humans are a very visual species. We like to see things in front of us. And then once you have all of that set up, then when you kind of go back to your regular presentation, as you set up different slides, the theme is changed overall. So maybe add a couple of these in, a couple of these slides in. Yeah, so you can see all those changes carry through across the entire set of templates, not just going through slide by slide and adjusting those features. So you have to look around for different places. If it's somewhat newer software, it'll almost always be under the label theme. And if it's somewhat older software, pre-2005, that's when I first started seeing those name changes show up a lot in electronics, and dropping the word master from stuff and other terms that would offend a lot of people. So if the software is newer than 2005, it'll probably say something about theme or templates or something like that. Hasn't really settled into a standard since the name changed. It's mostly just people realizing that the name needed to be changed. But if it's older, it'll either be a button called Master Slide or Slide Master, and then can make things look really nice really quickly. And another thing is there's all these spots to add words, right? Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 some more. I just mentioned that our goal with the slide deck is always going to be, almost always going to be to convince somebody of something. And words usually aren't the best way to do that. The fewer words you can put on your slide, the better it will be. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Pictures and colors and patterns that will just catch your attention. And another thing that you will probably hear in your speech class, whenever you have words on your slide deck, people will ignore what you're saying and read the words. So the biggest thing you want to avoid is you definitely don't want to put the script for your slide there, right? A lot of y'all have probably sat through classes before like that, right? Where you show up for class and the instructor is just standing there reading the words on the PowerPoint. It's like, okay, I finished reading that a few seconds ago, and before long you start doodling in your notebook or something and drift off and you're no longer paying attention to class. So definitely avoid that, but minimize words. There is another side to that too, right? The fact, what we know from that is that if you put a lot of words in your presentation, people will read the words and ignore what you say. And there are situations where we want that to happen. So keep that in, doing the right thing for the right situation. But pictures are much, much better than words. Minimize the words you have on there. One of the best things to do is to stick with like headers and pictures as much as possible. Just like the header for the slide, what you're going to talk about, and then some pictures to accompany what you're saying. And with things like bulleted list, a lot of people, just from years in the education system, want to write everything as like full grammatically correct sentences. But remember, with a bulleted list, it's going to be better to have a short sentence fragment that is direct and right to the point. So maybe don't necessarily worry about all grammatically correct points, and kind of the back to the thing I was just saying about pictures. You want to use that to accompany what you're saying, not to take the place of what you're saying. Because you're going to try to convince people of something, and pictures do a lot more than words when convincing people. That was kind of the only points I had on PowerPoint. Otherwise, it's most people find it, I shouldn't say PowerPoint, presentation productivity software is the formal name. I guess most people are going to say slide decks. There's lots of different ones, lots and lots and lots of options available, but they basically do the same thing. They produce a presentation, and then we'll click a play slideshow button and just kind of click our way through it. And when you get to the end, kind of cancel out of it. Most people are familiar with that. Oh, I guess I should add in here, there is a spot for speaker notes, and depending on your computer setup, you can set it so that you see the notes and the people watching your presentation see the slide. So things like I just mentioned, where you really, really don't want to read the slide. You don't want to stand in front of a crowd reading the words they can see on the screen. If there's most people can read themselves, and if people can't read, you don't want to single them out for it. So you need to have everything in what you say and minimize what is written. And there's a little note pane that will be available in all the types of software. Put your script down there, or at least some notes, because usually if you write out a script, it's going to sound like you're following a script, unless you're just a really, really good actor that can recite a script precisely and make it sound like you're not reciting a script precisely. But most of the people that can do that really, really well work as actors. And most of us, if we're reading from a script, it's going to sound like we're reading from a script. So just get some notes so that you have the idea of what you want to talk about, but it still feels like it flows out naturally. And the note pane you can set that up so that you can see the note pane, but the audience can only see the presentation. That was the only notes I had on those. Does anybody have any questions about presentation productivity software before we move on to the next one?
No, sir.
Okay, yeah, I was getting ready to say, I assume the silence means no questions, which I need to turn my mic up a little bit. That was really quiet when you answered. I don't think I have numbers on here, so I'm just going to go with the Google Spreadsheets when I get the Zoom thumbnails out of the way. Or I should just minimize them. There is this little button here that makes it really small. There we go. I always forget that's there. There it is, Sheets. So if you like to type addresses directly, it's docs.google.com/spreadsheet. And the last one that I just closed is docs.google.com/slides. And then at the end there, /u/0, there will be a list of all the users on the machine, all the different profiles. So like if you come over to Chrome and click on your profile picture, you'll see, well, I guess on this computer, I only have one account. I apparently haven't used my Ivy Tech account on this computer yet. I know it would show up on some other ones, but if you have more than one account, the first one in the list, the start of the list is number 0. And then they just go in order as you go down the list. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So whichever account you want to get into, you can do the address and then /u for user, and then whichever number that user is in your Google profile to see it. So the foundational assignment this week is about spreadsheets, which have become immensely useful software. Very, very incredibly useful software. So they grew out of what's called comma separated variable files. Let me make up some data. So I'm gonna put some headers like we're making a table of data. Name, age, town. That's the one I always use for a generic example of data in classes. Just make up some people's names, ages, and towns. These do not represent any actual people, just making them up right off the top of my head. But a CSV file is just text separated, and we use commas to separate it. I put spaces on there. Let me get rid of the spaces. So like Sally, age 33, lives in Salem. Or Chuck, age 26, lives in Charleston. Or Alan, who's 17, lives in New Albany. And notice how we just have some text-based data that's been, and we delimit all of our data points with commas. It's named comma separated variables. Name, age, town. I don't know. I'll call this stuff.csv. And then the file extension just tells the computer what to do with it. So the name part, the stuff before the dot, that tells the human what to do with it. And then the dot, something else, tells the computer what to do with it. And we can override that part. We can open it with different software. I put this somewhere where I won't lose it. Or just in my working folder. Yeah, that'll work. As long as I can find it again. So we just have a bunch of text data separated with commas, a nice way to organize things. And that eventually grew into spreadsheets. Open another one here. Well, I'll just do it this way. So I can open up that CSV file. Oh, where'd Finder go? Get it somewhere where I can drag it. So you can see on that, from that text file, just some text data that was delimited with commas. Each little data point gets its own cell in this collection of columns and rows to help keep everything organized. So it grew from, kind of grew from that, a nice way to organize stuff. And really it's accounting software. And there's a lot of functionality here. So just like way back in the days of everything was on paper, that green columnar paper, if anybody's seen that, accountants used to have the best paper. And when everything moved digital, in a lot of ways, accountants have the best software. So it started with things like that. And we can kind of take it further. Yeah, I'll do something like this. If we wanted something a little fancier, I'm going to put a comma to leave that first one blank. Then I'm going to add all of these numbers together. Equals 33 plus 26 plus 17. And then another comma to leave this one blank. So if I save that, and then I guess kind of upload that file again. So you can see right here, even though the data itself, what I stored there is just some text, it was just in a particular form that the computer knew I wanted to do something with that. I wanted to actually do math, not just write that text on there. So spreadsheets can handle that. Have calculator functionality built right into them. So a good start is using a spreadsheet as a calculator. Actually, I don't need that. There's a closer button. Leave that. So that's kind of how they started, but they've grown into something much, much more. And I don't think it's going to show on my Mac. Where'd Finder go? Zoom buttons are in the way. There we go. If I try to just open it, I was just going to open with the text file. I don't have numbers or anything on here. How quickly would it take to install that? About 3 minutes, I think. Yeah, if I had some spreadsheet software installed locally, this CSV file would try to open with that by default. So if you have put together a comma separated variable file, and when you just double click on it on your computer, it should open with either Excel or numbers or LibreOffice, whichever spreadsheet software you have locally. But I apparently don't have any installed on my Mac right now. So it gives us ways to organize things. And a few other key functionality points. Just going to hit a few points here real quick. And then if anybody has any questions, like you haven't used spreadsheets much before, let me know and we can look at those later. I think a lot of people have probably seen them. So there's like copy and paste stuff. There's actually copy and paste is shortcutted. You'll notice when that particular cell is highlighted, there's this little box in the corner. You can drag that down, and that's a copy and paste. But it's also sort of a smart copy. So if there's enough to recognize a pattern, like 1 and 2, and then I start dragging that down, it's going to recognize that as a pattern of things to count on. And it will recognize some keywords. So if I put in like Monday, and then grab that little drag handle to copy and drag over, so it recognizes all the days of the week. Might as well go to Sunday. And tries to fill in patterns as we spread things out. I need to drag it one cell further and the pictures are in the way. There we go. That was just bothering me more than it should have to not have all 7 days on there. And then it would loop around. I guess I could show that. So if I highlight those and keep dragging, it knows the days of the week. So it'll start over and organize things that way. And some common abbreviations, I'll do that with months. So like if I say January and then use that drag handle, it's going to know all of the months. Notice when the starting one was spelled out, it spelled them all out. And when the starting one was abbreviated, it abbreviated all of them. Some other keywords like quarter, that's a common label to have on tables of data. So if we label something with a quarter, it knows there's only going to be 4 quarters, and then it starts back over at the next quarter. Dates, things like that. We can organize stuff differently. So like today's date, what is today? 9/6/2022. I click on this, and there's lots of different ways we can format it. So instead of just being a number, we could specifically put it as a date or time. I guess I should do is 9/6. There we go. So I just typed 9/6 and then went ahead and adjusted that to the year. Let me do that again so y'all can see it. If I type 9/6, which kind of looks like a date, at first it's just going to show the text, but with some formatting rule, somewhere in the formatting rules, we can set that up as a date. Same thing with like money. If we had 23, but that was supposed to be dollars, there's some preset formatting under number to adjust it to look like currency and all the formatting things you would expect. I'll put it right here. If you want to do math like a calculator, because maybe I didn't mean 9/6 is in September 6, I meant 9 divided by 6. To do math, you'll start with the equal sign. So if you just start typing and just typing text characters in there, it's telling the computer to show that text. So sort of a binary state there. We either start with our text or we start with an equal sign. If we start with an equal sign, that's telling the computer to do math. So like 9 divided by 6, type the same thing in there as I did in this box, and that equal sign out front tells it to do math. We can also refer to the cells. They all have names. See from the rows and columns here, A, B, C, D. And then our rows have the numbers. So all of the cells, you can see up here, right now I'm in column B, cell 15, or column A, cell 2. It's usually useful to rename those. For those who have had at least the basic logic class or some programming before, you'll notice I said this grew from something that had variable in the name. So every cell is kind of treated like a variable. So we can give this another number. I don't know, I'll call it double. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. And then A3, that has a 3 in it, so I'll call that triple. Just to give those cells different names. You see up here in the corner, A1, then our double and triple. So if we wanted to do math with those, well, we can always, we could type them in, like A11 minus A10, or you can just click on them. So A11 minus that cell. It's a lot easier just to click on them than do that. And if you have names on them, then you can use those names. So like I renamed this cell, instead of A2, it's now called double. We'll say equals double plus triple. And those cells do have specific names that we can store things in. Lots and lots of functionality they would have. One of the most common things we'll use it for is to, along with organizing our data, putting nice labels on everything and numbers in the cells. We use it for plotting things a lot. There are some pre-built functions we can use. I'm not going to get very far into those right now, but for I need some random numbers. Yeah, I'll just use small ones. Oh, and that's a good little feature. Notice I didn't even have to put copy and paste. It wants to copy and paste that. It's like, okay, from the patterns here, it looks like what you just typed there should be copied in all of these cells. So there's some nice little features like that. You'll want to kind of mess around with them, get used to them. And all our labels and stuff, maybe I can do that this way. So like A and B. Notice those random numbers are changing every time I do something. Usually we don't do a lot of random number stuff. Oh, no, that wasn't enough. A, B, C. Will that pick up the pattern? Nope. I'll just have to type them all. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Oh, actually, I can do that Monday thing, couldn't I? If I type Monday and then Tuesday, That'll be a pattern it knows. There we go. So we got some labels and some data. And what we'll use the most often is we use our spreadsheet to make really nice charts. So if we highlight those, then under insert, and no matter which spreadsheet software you're using, it will always be under the insert button. When we click the insert, there'll be an option to insert a chart. And get nice graphs and plots. The controls will be in different spots, depending on which one, but should have the same control there. It's like, oh, I didn't want a column chart. I wanted like a pie chart. Get that, and notice how it showed the labels on there. I'll put that in just a terrible spot. Okay, so there were words and numbers, so it automatically figured out which one were labels and which one were numbers. Sometimes if I would have highlighted column A and B, it might have produced a little bit of confusion over which one were labels and numbers. Since this one is just 1 through 12 and this one is random numbers, it probably would have got that right. Different types of charts we can have, make nice looking charts, tons and tons of formatting features, which data we're using, switch labels, and reorganize our data. I guess that it's not good data to reorganize, but lots and lots of control over that. And if you haven't used it before, you'll want to kind of click around, do some stuff, get familiar with it. It is immensely useful software. That was just a quick pass at some of the very common useful features. Can go a lot longer than that. As far as the Microsoft Office certifications, I thought Excel was the most difficult one because there's so much this software can do. Even in Word, there's a lot of buttons. There's still tons and tons of buttons and lots of things that can do, but we're always using that to make a Word document or for PowerPoint. On the certification exam, just because those look really, really nice on resumes. So not a bad certification to grab and pad out your resume to have that paperwork that says you passed the test and you are actually an expert in Microsoft Office stuff. Because pretty much any business is going to use Office software, so it's going to look good on any resume. With slide decks, there's lots of functionality, but we're pretty much always building a presentation. And there's a lot more things we can do in spreadsheets. We can program video games in spreadsheets. Okay? We just talked about, we have variables. I renamed a couple of them. We have some pre-built functions, and we can do math. So there's enough there to do a video game. So we can do so much more in a spreadsheet than our other software. It takes a long time to learn it all. It can do a lot. I often, looking back, I may have had a bit of an unfair advantage on learning spreadsheets because the first time I used a spreadsheet, the columns didn't even go all the way through the alphabet. First time I ever used a spreadsheet, the columns only went up to letter P and the rows only went up to number 16, which is still 256 cells to work with. So we can do a lot in 256 cells. They're much, much bigger now. It's pretty much as much as your computer hardware can hold until you max out RAM with these little cells filled with text. And each symbol that we see in the text is 16 bits. So it takes a long, long time to run out of RAM on a modern computer. It's still quite possible. There are plenty of things we can do that would bring even our fanciest computers to a grind them to a halt. But in general, we're not going to do that in our spreadsheet. But you want to just kind of start doing things, mess around with them. I don't have Excel on this one. The ones I normally point out for the next thing I was going to say, I do with some Excel templates. But a great way to learn this, to get started in Excel, is just start with some of the open up the templates that they have. So like a monthly budget template, that sounds nice. The one I usually point at is on Microsoft Excel. There's a wedding planner budget, which obviously it's very easy to go in and change the label that says wedding planner and some of the pictures and stuff and apply it to any budget. But it is really, really nice. And a great way to start is kind of look at some of the stuff that they have in here. Well, maybe not the spark lines, I can just click that. But the error handling for the numbers we have. Whoops, escape out of that. How much goes into the budget and where we enter numbers. So like here, how much can we spend on food? I don't know, $240 a month. Spend $30 buying gifts for friends, and go through and set up a budget and look at the different equations and things and kind of click around a template to familiarize yourself with the software if you've never used it before. Templates are a great place to start. I considered saying that in the Word document and the presentation productivity software, but there's so much more we can do in Excel. I decided to leave that comment off for there. So like to-do list, anything, you see it has that great organization system. Set up a to-do list, and when we check things off, it'll cross them off, automatically cross them off for us, and different templates. The big thing to remember with spreadsheets, you can tell just from looking at a blank one. We have lots and lots and lots and lots of little bitty cells. That means the software as a whole can do a lot, but in each particular cell, you want to do small things. So small, simple things in each individual cell and let them add up to something big. So try not to do too much at once. Like if you needed a weighted average, right? If we had a bunch of numbers, so like for sales figures, maybe we selling some hats and some t-shirts and hoodies at a flea market or out on the street outside of the Yum Center during a U of L game, or there's people from all across the state. I'm drawing a blank. Is it Lucas Oil Stadium? Is that the one in Indiana? Whatever our big stadium is, right? Selling hats and t-shirts and hoodies to grab a few extra bucks after a game. And you want to keep track of it. So maybe you sold 12 hats and they were $15 each. And 22 shirts that were $10 each. Not very fancy shirts, just screen printed the logo, a basic thing. That way people had at least the right color shirt to go into the game. Oh, Lucas Oil and Banker Life Fieldhouse. Thank you, yes. Great big long name. Stadiums used to have short names. Maybe this is early in the season outside Lucas Oil, and I already forgot the rest of the name, and Banker Life Fieldhouse. Two different ones. So early in the season outside Lucas Oil Stadium. So we're not going to sell a lot of hoodies because it's still really warm, right? Maybe sold 4 hoodies, but they're like $23 a piece. And notice that I only typed the number. So I'm going to want to do math with that number. But format is a very important thing because format means it's going to look different. So for things like the $, always enter your number directly and then let the formatting handle things like the $, because really that's just like a color on the number. And if we tried to type a $, there, we can't do math with the $. If we wanted to do, like, say, a weighted average, that's where we multiply all the hats we sold times the cost of the hats, divided by how many we had. Same thing with the shirts. And we apply both the quantity and the quality of it to find the average. It's going to look like a mess doing it all in one thing, because we need to take the number of hats times the cost of each hat, plus the number of shirts times the cost of all the shirts. And notice I'm just clicking on it. It's a lot easier to click than try to type in all the names. And number of hoodies times the cost of the hoodies. And we want to know an average price. So when we enter that, we get $492. That can't be the average price of the number we sold. So there's still another step in that. We're talking about money, so we need to divide by 100. And overall, that can't be right. Times that, plus that, times that, plus that. Oh, sorry, we're not dividing by 100. Dividing by the cost per item. So we need to divide by the number of items we sold, which would be this plus this plus this. And that formula got kind of messy kind of quick. Okay, that makes sense. The average cost per item was $12.95. We sold mostly t-shirts, but there were some more expensive things in there. So the average cost was a little more than the cost of a t-shirt.
Hold on, can you go back real quick, please?
Yeah.
Hold on, dang it,
We're
now I
at
can't
time.
even see you on my phone. So I got, I'm trying to see how you just did the average. I know you said like D plus.
Oh, yeah, I was getting ready to do that a lot better.
Okay, go ahead. Nope, so I'll be quiet. You go back.
Okay, yeah, because that's a long, messy thing, right? We put a lot into one cell, but we can do that in small cells along the way. Like we know we're going to need the, a weighted average is the quantity times the quality. We add all of those up, our quantity and quality together, and then divide by our overall quantity. Like a GPA is a very common weighted average. We can do that in small sections. So maybe we could just take this number times this number. And notice for our formula, we're looking 1, 2, 3 cells over, and then looking 1, 2 cells over. So when I copy that down, that pattern is what carries through. On this next cell, we're looking 1, 2, 3 cells over, and then looking 2 cells over. So you want to work with patterns, do small things, and then we can find the sum of those, which is usually just a single button. I almost never use that button, so it's probably going to predict it. I start typing sum, and so the sum of a bunch of numbers, we can type it in. The easiest way is just to drag and highlight for those who haven't worked with spreadsheets much before. Lots of different ways to do it. Taking a sum is a very common thing. So there's always a button that you can just one click and get the sum button. I think it's under the dots over here. Yeah, I should do that instead. So instead of typing that in, a sum is a very common thing. So I can just click a button and take a sum. And most of the spreadsheets, first off, they will try to look upward for numbers. And if they don't see some numbers they can sum up above them, they will try to look to the left and sum up all the numbers to the left. And if they don't see anything in either one of those places, they'll ask the spreadsheet will ask the human for what numbers. So then we get that, and then we can do that last step of start with an equal sign to do some math. Say an average, don't really want the average here. Again, that it's got that predictive ability. So we want to take this number and divide by our total quantity, which will be the sum of all of these numbers. And you see, we still got the same answer, but none of our cells have anything very complicated in it. Actually, I could do the sum here. We click the sum button again, sum up all these numbers. And then in that final cell, we just do equals the amount of money we brought in from selling things divided by the number of items we sold. And that's how you want to approach a spreadsheet. We have lots and lots and lots of little cells, so only do small things in each particular cell and let it add up to something big instead of trying to do something complicated all in one spot. You can see that looks like a mess. It's an easy spot to make a mistake in. So kind of some key points on spreadsheets. If there's an assignment, follow the instructions or do your own thing. I'm fine with you doing your own thing. There's a rubric there. So just look at that rubric and make sure I can check every box on the rubric. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go through there and be like, okay, there's a chart inserted. There's some colors changed. There's the font changed from the default. And I'm just gonna go through that rubric and check all those. So you can do your own, feel free to do your own thing instead of following those step-by-step instructions. But the step-by-step instructions are a nice way to make sure that you get all of that stuff done and don't have to think as much about it. But it's very useful software, used in a lot of places. You see it all over the place. Great for organization, doing math with it. There's a lot of stuff we can do. And if you're not familiar with spreadsheets already, my recommendation is to go to the templates and kind of start clicking around on the templates. Some of the obvious ones like monthly budgets, to-do list, invoices. I think that's an invoice, yeah, or finance tracker. That might be a little complicated. Team rosters, baseball scorecards are very, very common ones. If you're a baseball or softball player, then you'll know how to split up each one. Same thing with bowling, because there's formulas, right? What we roll in certain places is our scores calculated differently. So if you play certain sports, you can probably find a template for the scorecards in the sports you play and help to get familiar with it and see the formatting options. But most of you all have at least heard of spreadsheets before, right? Maybe encountered them once or twice somewhere. Very common, immensely useful software. It is definitely one you will want to know. And best way to learn it is just start clicking around on it. And for the assignment, look at the rubric. If you want to follow the step-by-step instructions, that's fine. But if you want to do your own thing, just make sure that every checkbox in that rubric can be checked off. And now that we've seen a couple assignments, some of your classmates can definitely confirm. Until we run out of the time at the end of the semester, I'm not going to put a bad grade on there. I'm going to send you, I'll mark a couple points off, but I'm also going to send you an email and ask you to put those back in there. Like if you want those points back, you just do this and this and this. Because I am much more concerned with correct than quick until we run out of time, which is still 5 weeks away. So we are nowhere near running out of time yet. So yeah, if kind of work through the assignment, if there's something big, I will let you know before I just mark a bunch of points off. And if it's just 2 or 3 points, I will include in the comments in the grade book exactly what you have to do to get those 2 or 3 points back, and you can resubmit it. Let's see, I guess that's sort of some of the productivity software. And Excel is definitely one of our best productivity software. The things we saw with document editors and presentation productivity software, we can do that in Excel. We can program video games in Excel. It is very, very, very good software to know. And on all 3 of those, after you mess around with them a little, the certification exams aren't that bad. They are lengthy. So you kind of want to do some thorough studying before you take the certification exams. But those certifications will look great on any resume you put together because it's going to say you're an expert in Office software, which every office is going to use. Does anybody have any questions about that stuff? Okay, if you do, let me know. We can go through Excel in great detail. I can show you lots and lots and lots of things about Excel, way more than would fit in our classroom. I could easily burn up 8 weeks of Excel and still not show you everything, all the stuff about Excel. So I'm getting really thirsty. I'm ready for a cup of coffee. So does 10 minutes sound good to everybody? Looks like it's been about an hour. Okay, and then afterwards, we're going to talk about binary representation, because the place where that was the course where that was officially covered is the statewide shell kind of moved that over into a discussion board. So I want to make sure and cover it in more places, because binary is kind of an important thing if you're heading into IT. So after the break, we'll look at binary representation of data, how the machine deals with it. Then on Thursday, we'll look at databases, which is what we as humans need. But for now, let's take a 10-minute break. My clock says 2:02, so we'll get back to it at 2:12. See y'all in just a moment.